proposed budget. And I will go ahead and start the presentation. Shay, do I have screen sharing rights here?
Yes, sir.
All right, I will move forward. All righty, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, we'll move forward. Again, the 2021-22 budget presentation. I'm the Chief Financial Officer, Levon Singleton. Dr. Scott Spurgeon is our superintendent. I always like to start my budget presentations just quickly reflecting on a couple important things that really drives the budget. Just like our day-to-day operations is driven by curriculum and those kinds of things, I do believe that the mission and vision of the school district should be driven, and it should be evident and obvious in the school budget as well. So just reminding us of the RGSD mission, the Riverview Gardens School District, along with its families and the community, nurtures academic excellence in all students, preparing them to be college and career ready in an ever-changing society. And certainly this past year has been very indicative of an ever-changing society. Also, the vision of our school district as well, the Riverview Gardens School District, creates a community of learners equipped to be competitors in a global society and leaders demonstrating social and civic responsibility. So the mission and vision should certainly be reflected and evident in the school budget. I also mentioned the value statements. Everything we do should be student focused, meeting the needs of the whole student. Students are at the forefront of all decision. Again, meeting the needs of the whole student, a safe learning climate, and caring are essential to meeting the social, emotional, and academic needs of all students. As well, collaboration is key. The school community, the school families and community should all work together, supporting each other. Integrity, we demonstrate honesty, transparency, ethical behavior, and trustworthiness in everything we do every day. So those are some key critical components and values that should be reflected in our budget. So we're going to jump right in. One of the most important pieces of an annual budget, we know this is a annual requirement. It must be adopted before July 1st. And so the operating budget for the 21-22 school year is based on a number of factors. You'll see 4 columns. We're going to go over the revenues first, give you a good idea of where the school district gets its funding from, what sources. We're going to look at the first column has the actual numbers from 19-20. Obviously, we don't have actual numbers from the current year yet. They're not ready because obviously we still have about a month and a half remaining in this current year. But you will see those numbers projected in the third column where we say projections, where we think we're going to end the 2020-2021 school year. The middle column, the second column is the budgeted 2020-2021. That information, that is the adopted budget column that the Special Administrative Board approved back in June of last year. And then the very last column says budgeted 2021-2022. Those numbers reflect the proposed budget for the upcoming fiscal year. So if we look across the board at our current and delinquent property taxes, historically, we've been able to capture roughly $7.5 to $8 million. One of the things that I am very proud of.
I would use 2 plates.
Well,
Somebody needs to mute.
That sounds like, oh, I'm sorry. All right, one of the first column here, the information, the current and delinquent property taxes, again, we've been able to capture about $8.5 million in the range of $7.5 to $8.5 million. The current year or the next fiscal year that we're budgeting for, 21-22, we know that Proposition E was a success, and that's why you see the $11.6 million. We're going to receive an additional 3.9, almost $4 million in December of 2021, which is the next fiscal year. So we're going to budget those additional revenues as a result of Prop E passing successfully, most recently here at the April 6th election. So that's why you see that the $11,650,000 number. The Prop C, those are sales taxes. That's the 1% sales tax. And we have consistently collected about $5.6 million there. The other local revenues, we receive roughly about $600,000 to $700,000. And so we feel very confident at that $675,000 number. The county revenues, this is where your utilities, state assessed utilities come into play here. And we've collected roughly about $850,000. So we feel very confident in that $855,000 number in county revenue. The state revenue, again, the foundation formula, it serves as the overall basis of our budget. The majority of our revenues, as you can see, come from the state revenue category. And that is a result of the foundation formula. And I'll talk in the presentation things that impact the foundation formula and where we need to make sure we're focused on. Our federal revenues, those include our Title I, our Title II, and our food service monies. We're budgeting about $9.1 million there. And I'm going to go back over, just revisit that projected column, because that that 1, 2, 3, the fourth column over says projected 2020, 2021. In the federal column, that 5,329,883 number, that number is as a result of food service revenues being reduced this year. We experienced, obviously, with our virtual platform, it was very difficult to feed our students, and food service has always been a major part of our budget. And so we're projecting to end about that $5.3 million number. That encompasses all of our federal revenues, but we're down because of food service. Additional, the CARES Act numbers that are there. As you can see, we're not budgeting any of the CARES Act monies for next year because those CARES Act monies, the $2.8 million we received, we're anticipating to spend that by the end of this fiscal year, June 30th. And there's some small numbers we always budget for student activities, those for our football, basketball, track and field, all of those athletic competitions. And then there's a small portion related to others, as you can see. So the total operating revenues for the 2021-22 school year, we're looking at about $58,440,325. Dr. Beckwith, I will pause right here to see if there's any questions related to revenues.
Yes, first a comment. Explain to the listening and viewing audience, we passed Prop E in April. Do we immediately get the money?
No, sir, Dr. Beckwith. As you recall, Proposition E is an operating tax levy increase. The local taxpayers will receive, will obviously bear the brunt of Prop E. And so we're going to recoup those revenues. We're going to start to see an influx of those monies in December when your tax bills are due. So your real estate taxes, your personal property taxes, those are what Proposition E was going to generate additional dollars. And so, no, sir, we will not see those before June 30th. In fact, we will start to see those monies come in around the December and January timeframe.
Okay. And our fiscal year starts on July 1, correct?
Correct.
So you're counting money in the 11,650,000 that we won't start getting the Prop E part until supposedly December if they pay their taxes on time. By the way, what percentage of taxes do we actually collect? Do you
Dr.
have any
Beckwith?
idea?
Yes, that was one thing that I actually laid my eyes on those numbers today. And we have to be very impressed to know that Riverview Gardens has a 95 to 99% collection rate in our school district. So
And
historically, it's been very good.
That's great. I still think, and I'm harping on this, that some of our employees feel because the tax levy passed, the money is immediately available to us. So if I'm understanding it correct, we have to float money until the tax money starts coming in December, which I believe is not distributed until January.
It starts being distributed in December. So it's generally collected around that November. There are people that pay early and they don't hold on to it. So around that December, we usually get big checks around December, January, and February. Those are the hot months that we received big checks for personal property taxes and real estate taxes.
So if I'm adding this correct, there's about a $3.6 million increase in property taxes from the projected in 2020, 2021 to 2021, 2022. Am I correct?
Though when you say a $3.6 million projected increase,
Yes, I just subtracted the 7.9 from the 11,650.
Yes, sir. Actually, you're right, Dr. Beckwith. That is about a $3.6 million increase. Yes, sir.
Okay. Going to the federal, you mentioned food services. That's included in our fund balance?
It is. Food
Okay.
service has historically been included in the overall fund balance.
Right.
In fact, it's been our saving grace, to be honest.
Right, but at the same time, it's restricted. It's not general revenue. You can only spend it on food service related items. I believe that was a audit exception because something was purchased that was general aid this past school year, or this school year, or last school year, that really was beyond the scope of food services. The other is federal at 9.1. I assume most of that is Title I money.
The majority, yes, the majority of that is Title I money, but a good portion of that is reflected to recoup those federal food service dollars as well. So it's a combination of both. Both of those numbers are driven by title and food service.
Okay, and Ms. Loomis, I believe, is on the line. I thought Ms. Loomis told me that the Title I dollars would be drastically reduced. Ms. Loomis, if you're on the line, respond to that.
Dr. Beckwith, I can address that. I was privy to, as of last week, we actually have an agenda item tomorrow during the regular board meeting where Title I dollars preliminarily came in very much consistent with where they were the previous year. So, you know, they always give you the doom and gloom, and then for whatever reasons, the state always comes through with funding those federal revenues. So we did get preliminary numbers, and we're going to ask for permission to apply for that grant at tomorrow's board meeting. But I do believe those numbers came in roughly around that $7 or $8 million mark for next year. So I think our federal programs is right back on target with where we were in any other fiscal year.
So that was just gloom and doom.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's always the scenario. But yes, sir, I think those federal numbers were much better than we anticipated.
Ms. Mario, do you have any questions?
Believe it or not, he answered the questions that I had during his presentation.
Okay, Ms. Oswald needs to unmute. Ms.
Yes.
Oswald, you have any questions?
Yes, with other going across, it's 35,000, 25,000, and then 390,000
Hmm?
with the budgeted, the line other.
Mhm.
Right. Let me grab my notes real quick. Every now and then, Ms. Oswald, we get various other receipts. For instance, there's interest in a particular property that the school district has. We don't budget those things, so we generally have things that happen throughout the fiscal year that are not budgeted for, and that's the reason we stick a very nominal number there, that 25,000. But things like revenue from sales proceeds of land, or maybe a surplus sale on buses, those kinds of things. That's what we would put in the category called other.
Hey, Dr. Singleton, Lynn Bird is on the call. Mr. Bird, could you respond to that as well?
Not hearing Mr. Bird, let's move forward.
I'm sorry, it took me a moment to unmute. I do not
Okay.
recall exactly what that was in the projection. I will get that together and share it with the board for at tomorrow's meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions, or we can proceed to the expenditures, correct?
Right.
Okay, all right. So the next category is called the expenditures. And so if you'll recall, we said $58 million in budgeted revenues for the fiscal year 21-22. Now we're going to look at the expenditures. The expenditures for next fiscal year, obviously our biggest expenditure always is salary and benefits, okay? So as we can see, the first three lines or the first four lines are all driven by the staffing plan, okay? The SAB approved the staffing plan that was presented by Human Resources last month. And so those numbers tie directly to the head count for next year. So salaries, health insurance, there is a small anticipated increase in health insurance that I think Ms. Williams-Woods has brought to our attention. And then the pension and retirement cost, and then the other benefits, which have run consistently right at about $1.5 million throughout each of the fiscal periods, as you can see reflected here. Purchase services, we are looking at about $8.5 million. And that number is based on where we're projecting to end this fiscal year. We budgeted fairly high last year, but a more realistic number for us looks like about $8.5 million. Now, this does not include any of the ESSER funds. Let me qualify this. Once ESSER opens up and we apply for those funds, then certainly our bottom line, our coffers would look a lot better. But this $8.5 million is just pure GOB spending, in addition to what we budget for on an annual basis. So we've got a little money there budgeted in tuition. As you know, we bill other districts when our students attend, or when their students attend our schools from out of the area. And then our supplies numbers about $5.1 million. And you can see that's fairly consistent with the actual budget from 1920, and also kind of consistent with where we're projecting to end the 2020-2021 fiscal year. The utilities. Utilities are running fairly consistent, about $1.2, $1.4 million. And that's where we've budgeted our utilities as well. So our total expenditures are looking at $57,022,609. I'll pause again and ask, are there any questions related to the expenditures?
Ms. Oswald, unmute.
No questions.
Ms. Maureen,
Yes, so you said that the tuition cost is based on people sending students to us, or does it have anything to do with the transfers where the students went to other districts? I just
I'm
want to
sorry,
make
yeah.
sure.
Let me take that.
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Spurgeon. And I did misspeak. Yes,
okay.
go ahead. Dr.
Yeah,
Spurgeon, go ahead.
Ms. Marreal, we have to leave some money in that because, for an example, often every year we have students that might be either foster students or in residential treatment who have a parent or guardian that reside within our district, but they're assigned to different parts of the county. And so we have to pay a portion of what it costs to educate that child. So we have to leave money in there to be able to do that. But that money does not include any students in transfer as we would relate to the 2013 Supreme Court case.
Okay, thank you. You answered that question and my other question right together. So thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Spurgeon.
I'm thinking for a moment. Remind me how much we are projected to get from Prop E. In the Prop E handbook, fact book, you mentioned 3.4. Are you standing with that 3.4 or you've moved that up?
No, Dr. Beckwith, we have adjusted that number according to preliminary AV numbers. The $3.4 million would have been consistent with a flat assessed valuation. And our assessed valuation last year was about $210 million. Preliminary numbers show that our assessed valuation right now is projected to be at about $238 million. So there's a $28 million increase in assessed valuation. And so we're projecting, and the math will add up very close to 3.9, right at about $4 million from the anticipated 3.4 million that we were thinking that we were going to receive as a result of Prop E. So that
Well, the
number's going up.
listening audience, explain what assessed valuation is.
Sure. Assessed valuation is nothing more than the sum of all of the property values in a taxing area. So for the Riverview Gardens School District, $210 million represents the sum of all of the property values, residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural, and understand that we really, the vast majority of our money comes from residential. There is absolutely no commercial, very little commercial within the boundaries of the Riverview Gardens School District, very little agricultural monies that we receive, and probably nothing in terms of industrial. So assessed valuation, again, is the summary. It's the sum of my house plus your house and everybody else's house, what that value equals. And based on those numbers, we're assessed. There's a tax rate associated with what the school district can anticipate collecting.
Okay. I ask that for a reason. I often hear some of our employees say, well, Ferguson Florissant pays much more than Riverview Gardens pays their employees. Again, our assessed valuation is $210 million. Ferguson Florissant is just over $1 billion. Mainly they have Boeing and some other large. So you have to consider that. In addition, special school district, $27 billion, although they have higher cost students, and I understand that, but they can tax the whole St. Louis County, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. We can only tax those that live in the Riverview Gardens School District. Saying this to say, assessed valuation has a lot to do with how much money you can raise. we can raise 210 million. Parkway can raise 1.5 billion, Kirkwood 1.6 billion, Hazelwood 1.9 billion. So the race is not even. Continue.
Thank you. I'll move forward to the next slides. And so as you'll see, the end results of the revenues and expenditures gets us to the opening and ending fund balance. And so if you will look at historically, the very bottom number represents our percent fund balance. And so in 1920, we had a 17.53 fund balance. The SAB minimum mandatory fund balance is 15%. So I will mention that information. Also, the budgeted fund balance last year fell slightly below the 15%, right at 13.97. The projected fund balance for 2020, 2021, we are projecting to be just slightly below that 15% for the end of this fiscal year. And again, as I pointed out, the culprit in that third column over is the lack of roughly maybe $3.5 million in food service revenues that we will not see by the end of the fiscal year. So that's the reason that we dipped below the 15% in the projected column for 2020, 2021. We are budgeting and we are, because of Prop E, we think that our numbers will be a lot better than any of these numbers that you see. And it's mainly going to be because of the increased revenues that you will see as a result of Proposition E. So we're expecting and we're budgeting for a 20.26% fund balance for the 2021-2022 school year. Are there any questions?
Dr. Singleton, let me jump in real quick. Levon and I and Yvonne Green and Kim Loomis met with Dr. Carrie Monsees, who is the assistant commissioner at DESE over finance. And one of the things he mentioned to us was that he believes there is some relief coming for the food service department in regards to the loss of revenue because of the COVID pandemic. But he won't know that for sure, or an amount that might be able to help us for about a month. So we know there's something coming. We just don't know how much and when.
Ms. Morrill, do you have questions on this slide?
I do not.
Ms. Oswald?
No, I don't.
Okay. The 20.26% fund balance follows 2 years when we didn't meet the 15% minimum. Again, am I correct that in that 20.26 are restricted funds, Title I, and food service?
Yes, that 20.26% represents the overall fund balance, including all sources.
Okay, and so Ms. Morrill and Ms. Oswald, what I'm saying, that is not a true GOB fund balance. That's a fund balance that includes federal funds, excluding ESSER. And tomorrow night, Ms. Loomis will talk to us in open session about lesser.
Okay.
So it looks good, 20.26, but that includes federal restricted funds. So our true fund balance of GOB is lower than that. Continue.
Okay. Also, let me point out, Lynn Bird did put some information in the chat here. Thank you, Mr. Bird. And I think this does answer Mrs. Oswald's question regarding that other column. Let me read it to you real fast. It says, over the last 3 years, the district refinanced bonds that were not yet callable. The district put those proceeds in escrow until the bonds were callable. During the current year, approximately $350,000 in escrow funds were used to pay off bonds that came due. That represents the other receipts in the current year. So hopefully that answers your question about some of the activity that we include in that other column. Okay. Moving along again, when it comes to the fund balances, obviously the 15% minimum we feel that we're going to meet in the budgeted column 2021, 2022. Some information that I included in my slide last year, and I won't spend a lot of time on this because it's just not necessary. I think and the finance team needs to make sure we understand the foundation formula. For informational purposes, again, I include how it works, and it is the major source of support for public schools. It factors a number of things: student attendance, local property taxes, the proportion of students in the district who are disadvantaged and special needs, and if the school district provides for summer school and other things. Funds received through the foundation formula are primarily used to pay teacher salaries in the school district. Some other information, again, I've included this in past slides, how the foundation formula works. Again, this is something that we need to know in the finance area. For presentation purposes, it's here for informational only. So again, there are 4 components that compose of this foundation formula. And these are things that we have to do. We have to make sure that our average daily attendance is up. The more our kids come to school, the more monies we get from the foundation formula. The state adequacy target looks at performance across all the districts, including those top districts, and see on average, what are those operating expenses, or what does it take to educate those students? So that's a factor and component of the foundation formula as well. The dollar value multiplier is the cost of living. It's simply put, what does it cost? What's the cost of living? And then there's a local effort component, how much each district is able to generate locally at the local level. And obviously, the less you're able to generate locally, the more the state kicks in. And so that's really things that we focus on when we look at that state foundation formula. I'll pause and ask, are there any questions related to the foundation formula?
I have none.
No questions.
No questions.
Thank you. Some other things that we just should always consider. Again, Dr. Beckwith asked earlier, assess property value. Assess valuation is always important. And historically, the Riverview Gardens School District has seen declining property values in the area, okay? Here more recently, we've seen these numbers take a turn for the better. And I've just given you a sample of where assessed valuation has been. So 2017, we were looking at about $191 million in assessed valuation. In 2018, it was very similar, and it kind of remained flat. It dipped some. Then in 2019, we had an increase. We saw a significant increase to about $211 million. And then 2020, we saw assessed valuation remain flat. Again, I'm sharing with you, as I mentioned earlier, that preliminary numbers, and these numbers can be validated on the county website, that we are seeing roughly a $238 million preliminary assessed valuation numbers, and that is nothing but good news to our school district. So we have to always know and understand that assessed valuation is very important to a school district. The higher our property values, the more we can recoup in tax revenues for the school district. Are there any questions about assessed valuation that I can answer?
How, Dr. Singleton, how close normally is the preliminary to the final? Within 1%, 2%, 5%, 10%?
Yes, sir.
What?
Dr. Beckwith, I would say very close. I would say between 1% to 2%. We always have to factor in that the assessed valuation number is reduced by the TIF. And for those of you who are not familiar with what a TIF is, it stands for tax increment financing. And essentially TIF dollars are not included in the assessed valuation number because those numbers remain in the TIF district. So they are set up in TIF districts. And so those dollars are pulled back into the TIF in order to circulate and generate development within the TIF itself. So district dollars, even though we see an assessed valuation of $238 million, there may be $1 million or $2 million that we have to subtract because of this thing called TIF. So again, TIF is tax increment financing. A little more information than necessary here tonight, but certainly key things that we have to be aware of in finance because of what it does to assess valuation. So, but to answer your question, I think that these numbers should come very close, within 1% to 2% when the final numbers come out.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Moving right along, this is information that I always share. Revenue and expenditure projections. These are all factors that impact the school district budget, okay? Revenue and expenditures, for instance, we talked about where the revenues come from. We know the state formula is a major generator of revenues, our property tax assessments, the tax rates. And again, we just increased our tax rate, and we are very appreciative of the families in Riverview Gardens School District who trusted us enough to give us additional dollars to operate our schools. Also, the collection rate. Dr. Beckwith, you asked, what are the collection rates? This really blew my mind when I saw those numbers, 95, 96. There was one year recently where we collected 100% of the taxes. And so I am very proud of to be in a district where we have high collection rates. Property taxes, federal and state sources. We talked about Title I, Title II. This is the last year for SIG, school improvement. We have to make sure that the SAB knows that SIG is no longer in effect after the closeout period. And so Prop C, those are the state sales taxes and others. What are our expenditures? Again, we got to be conservative in our spending. Salary projections, anything that impacts us, like our bargaining agreements, those things have to be factored in. Insurance, retirement, our purchase services, our tuition. Again, we should brag because the transfer program, something that used to cost us, $11, $12 million a year, is costing us absolutely nothing at this time. And so I think that is something that the district should be very proud of. And then our supplies and our utilities as well. The fund balance changes, again, the past 5 years have been kind of consistent in stabilizing the fund balance. Prior to then, we've seen significant drops. And so we have to monitor our revenues and expenditures closely. I think my staff, the finance team, does an outstanding job of monitoring those day-to-day expenditures. We question, we ask questions, we reject things, we approve things, but we certainly are not fearful to ask questions when it comes to spending for the school district. So are there any questions here on revenue expenditure projections and also the changes in fund balance?
Ms. Oswald,
No questions.
Ms. Mario?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, Dr. Singleton, based on the projection that we're going to receive maybe 3.6 million from Prop E, which we will start spending money in July, is there any possibility, and we won't get the money starting till December probably, is there any possibility we will have to borrow money?
Dr. Beckwith, I will say this, historically, the district has not had to borrow money, at least in recent years. I've not done history past the last few fiscal years. But that is always an option. I do think that there's a very low possibility. We have staggered, for instance, I met with the curriculum and instruction department, and there are some huge curriculum adoptions that we have to do. And we have staggered those payments, Dr. Beckwith. That was one of the things that came with accepting the proposals is that we have staggered payments, because we know that if we start in July and August spending millions and millions of dollars, we know that that is going to have a significant impact on our cash flow, and it is going to cause us to be in a situation where we have to borrow from our property taxes. So I do not believe, Dr. Beckwith, that we will be in that situation. Although I am not a magician, I cannot forecast the future, but my hope is that we will have enough money in our beginning fund balance for next year, as well as continue to receive the state formula revenues. And by the way, Dr. Beckwith, there has been conversation that there should be no prorations in our state formula monies. We are anticipating to receive those this coming fiscal year at 100%. So all things are indicative that we should be able to pay our bills. So that answers the question. I hope that answers your question about whether we will find ourselves in a need to borrow.
Just to comment, in the 11 years that there's been a SAB, we've never had to borrow money to make ends meet. I hope, truly hope, next year is not the first year that happens. That would really disappoint me if that does.
Right.
Continue.
And one of the other ways, Dr. Beckwith, that we avoid that, expenditure reports for federal programs are usually due on a quarterly basis, but we file our expenditure reports on a monthly basis. And as we file, we generally get those reimbursements in fairly quickly. So that's one of the ways that we keep ourselves from having to borrow, is that we file for our reimbursements in a very timely manner, and we do get those monies in rather quickly. So those are the strategies we try to use to keep ourselves from borrowing. But I can tell you the finance department watches those fund balance numbers, or those projected revenues. We really monitor that very closely at the start of the fiscal year to make sure that we don't have a need to borrow.
You brought up a good point about Title I reimbursement, because I don't think some of our listeners realize we have to pay Title I expenses up front, and then we request reimbursement. Is that correct?
That is correct, Dr. Beckwith.
Okay.
The majority of our expenditures with federal programs, we, as the GOB pays the bills, and then once those bills are paid, we bill back the state and draw down those monies to reimburse ourselves. So you are correct. We do have to front the monies, but we do have no problem getting those monies reimbursed to us. If there are no additional questions, I will move to the last couple slides here. I always, again, we're talking about things that impact the school district's budget. We have to remember Proposition R. Proposition R, we passed it in April of 2018, a little bit more than 3 years ago. We got $11.7 million. I think we took a few million to retire some debt. And we also budgeted $8.9 million in capital improvements. As of April of last month, as of April of this year, we've got about $90,000 remaining balance, okay? Now that remaining balance means we have fully funded all of the projects, and we have roughly $90,000 remaining for contingencies and those other kinds of things in case something were to happen. But we have completed 20 of the 22 projects. The others are in closeout phase. And these are some of the projects: the HVAC, technology, the paving, the roofing, safety and security, the classroom renovations, playgrounds, abatement, and emergency repairs. We've had a couple of emergencies to sneak up on us, and we had to use Prop R dollars to address those situations. So again, we have very little monies left for Proposition R. And that's a good thing because a promise we made was a promise that we kept. And so I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that Prop R, those dollars are winding down. And so are there any questions about Proposition R?
Ms. Morrill? Unmute, Ms. Oswald.
No questions.
Okay. I didn't hear from Ms. Morrill.
I'm sorry. I have no questions.
Okay.
Mhm.
Dr. Singleton, I think one of the reasons that Prop E passed the way it did is because we kept our promise
Mhm.
with Prop R, and they were able to visually see what we had done. No other questions?
Thank you.
Mr. Cummings.
I've got about 2 or 3 more slides and we'll be done. So the other factor here in our current fiscal year budget, or I'm sorry, the 21-22 budget is Proposition E. And again, we budgeted roughly about $4 million in additional revenues that we'll be generating as a result of passing Proposition E. And we have to remember those priorities. These are things that we went to the constituents and the taxpayers and said, these are our priorities, and we're going to use Proposition E to strive to regain full accreditation. And we have to do those things that are required. Expand early childhood education, expand transportation for students, door to door within a mile, expand health services for students and families, enhance the salary schedule to attract and retain quality teachers, and also strive to establish community and adult education programs. And so our budget for Proposition E and our general operating budget should reflect those priorities. And we have started meeting. I think there's a chair for just about every one of those priorities. There's someone in charge of making sure that just like Proposition R, that we keep those promises for Proposition E. Are there any questions about Prop E and those priorities?
I would like to see a list of the people that are in charge of each priority.
Sure, I think that has
Once
been.
you get it created. Mhm.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Oswald. I will make sure that that list gets to you. I think that is already in motion, and we'll get that to you fairly soon.
Okay, thank you.
Can you more fully explain transportation door to door?
Yes. So one of the things and that's my priority. So I can speak to transportation. I am the person in charge of making sure that this happens. Right now, if you live outside of a mile radius, you are not afforded transportation. And it's just districts do not have to offer transportation for those students. But we know that our students come from various communities.
Hey, Levon, real quick, if you live inside of a mile, you're not offered transportation. If you live outside of a mile, you are.
That's right. I'm sorry. Sometimes my words are tied, but you're exactly right. If you live within a mile, you do not get transportation. If you live outside of the mile, then you are afforded transportation. And again, as we mentioned there, so right now we're looking at what it would cost us to transport all of our students who live within a half of a mile radius. Depending on those costs, we can continue to go down a little further. Obviously, if you live, just within walking distance of the school, we do not, you wouldn't qualify for transportation. And when we say door to door, we are talking about from your door to the school door. A lot of times our students are at bus stops and intersections that are very dangerous. And so there will be some instances where we are providing door-to-door transportation. We'll pick you up from your front door and drop you off at the school front door. So that is a priority that I'm working on, and I'd be happy to update the board, once we develop that. But right now I do have First Student looking at those costs.
Dr. Singleton, I believe in the final copy of the Prop E fact book, we changed door to door. I'm pretty sure we did. I don't have it right before, because that would intimate to some parents that everybody is going to be transported transported from their door to school, and that is not true. From the bus stop to the school. So look at that again.
Yes, yes, sir.
And then
Yes,
Dr.
sir.
Singleton, the other thing to keep in mind, you might want to explain a little bit further is it's not going to cost us a tremendous amount of money to expand this because we pay for the buses by the hour and they're already out on the route. So it's just picking up more students on the routes they're already on. So if you want to talk a little bit through that, that might be helpful.
Sure, sure. So expanding transportation, as Dr. Spurgeon said, will not cost us an exorbitant amount of money. We pay per student a daily rate. That daily rate gets us 4 hours of bus time, of drive time. And in many instances, the buses are traveling outside of a mile until they get within the mile radius as well. And so essentially to expand transportation really just means picking up more students who live closer to or outside of that or inside of that half of a mile radius. And it's really not going to cost us any more as long as we don't go over drive time. And so we're guaranteed 4 hours of services for a daily rate. And we feel like we can fit those additional spots within that 4 hour time frame or parameter. So we don't expect transportation to take a lot of Proposition E dollars to implement.
I do have one question just based on the routes. So the drivers are pretty much driving the same routes. It's just that there may be more stops within that route, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Absolutely.
Of students. Okay, so then the other question that I have is, okay, I know that we have bus pickup for our elementary, bus pickup for middle school, bus pickup for high school. Is that same bus, let's just say, the route where I live in Dalewood is Route A. So with the Route A then pick up like the high school students, then the middle school students, then the elementary students? Is that how they do it?
Ms.
Yes. So,
Barwell, it actually starts with the high school students first, then the elementary students, then the middle school.
Oh, okay.
Our last, so the high school starts at 7:30, elementary start at 8:05 in the morning, and then the middle school start at 8:45. So it's high school, elementary, in the middle. But there wouldn't be a time where there's multiple grades or multiple age groups on the bus at the same time. It's only high school or only elementary or only middle school.
Right. I know that, but what I was trying to say is, if the bus that may pick up for the high school kids, the elementary kids, and then the middle school kids, is that would be, like I was saying, if that's Route A, then Route A would do the high school, then it would turn around and do the elementary school, then it would do the middle school. So there are established routes that the bus drivers pick up all of. Okay, that's what I needed to know. I got you.
yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
The other thing, while we put in the fact book, enhanced salary schedule to attract and retain quality teachers, I would go further than that. Administrators and other employees, it's beyond quality teachers in my mind. It's in quality administrators, secretaries, whatever. Just a comment.
Yes, sir.
Ms.
Thank you.
Mario.
Dr. Beckman.
One more quick comment about transportation. If you remember, it was either 2 or 3 years ago. Remember, we had some issues with students had attendance challenges in the Highland area. And if you remember, we just asked the buses that were already picking up students outside of a mile that area to pick up the students till they filled their buses up closer to school.
Right.
It's the same philosophy where beforehand we couldn't, like, for example, there's probably some students that might live 8/10 of a mile or 9/10 of a mile that might walk up 2 blocks to a bus stop and get on the bus. We know that probably happens. I'm sure it does. But now, since we know those students exist, we're going to make sure that we have buses that we can fill those buses up all the way up to within a half a mile of school. And keep in mind that, you know, that may end up being a little less than that, might be 3/10 or 4/10 of a mile. I know that's going to be extremely helpful, especially during inclement weather days.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Singleton, the exact words that we use concerning transportation, expanding transportation to students who live within a mile. So in the future slides, let's take that door to door out, although we may do that for a few, but but it's expanding transportation to students who live within a mile.
Thank you, Dr. Beckwith. I will make that update and make sure that
Continue.
that's a part of the record for the meeting. Thank you. Okay, and I believe this is one of the last slides. And the conversation I simply wanted to mention, while we do not have ESSER being reflected in the general operating budget at this time, that we are preliminarily, our school district is going to receive about $15.2 million in ESSER 2 funds. ESSER 3 talks are underway. That's as a result of the legislation that our President Joe Biden has signed. And by all indication, ESSER 3 dollars are anticipated to be at least twice the amount of ESSER 2 funds. There are some conditions with these funds, obviously, and there are conversations being had. Again, Dr. Spurgeon mentioned that we were on a call with the Deputy Director of Finance for the state of for DESE, and we were given some more clear guidance, but we're waiting on some published documentation to really give us clarity on the uses of ESSER dollars. So the budget tonight does not include the ESSER dollars. Once we get that information, we are going to include those numbers in our budget scenarios to really show the SAB and our families the things that we can do using ESSER 2 and $3. So I did just want to mention that that will have a significant impact, but again, those conversations are still being had at this time. Are there any questions about ESSER 2 or ESSER 3 dollars that I can answer to the best of my ability?
For the listening audience, ESSER means Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund 2. And the law says these funds may be spent on anything that are the direct result of COVID-19. And that's very important. It is not free money. It has to be spent on something that is directly related to COVID-19, like in improving the ventilation system in a school. That's the response, a direct result of COVID-19. And the presentation will be made by Ms. Loomis on that tomorrow, because I wanted to make sure we're all clear on what ESSER 2 funds, and I believe you can go back and spend ESSER 1 funds if you have any left on the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Continue.
Okay. Dr. Beckwith, I think that is the end of the budget presentation. Again, we've given you a summary of the revenues and expenditures, and also other things that may impact our budget for the next fiscal year. And again, I always say, let's continue to do what we're all here for, and that's to do what's best for children. And if there are any questions that I can answer at this time, I would certainly be willing to answer any questions. But that concludes my presentation.
Ms. Morrill, do you have any additional questions?
Thank you for this presentation. I don't have any additional questions at this time.
Okay. Ms. Oswald?
No additional questions.
Okay. None that I want to ask now, Mr. Singleton, but I'll send you an email. I've looked at the line item budget, and there's some questions or comments that I have, but I'll send those to you no later than tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Beckwith.
Okay.
Dr. Beckwith, I believe there was one, there's an additional attachment. Let me make sure. Right, we got that. One of the things that I think Dr. Beckwith, you had asked was for just some scenarios, and this is really informational. So let me pull my screen back up here. Okay, this is informational here, but what I wanted to do, what I did was took the budget information for 21 and 22, again, the 58 million revenue dollars against the $57 million. Again, we talked about that 20% fund balance at the bottom. And I wanted to show the SAB what is the impact of a raise, okay? And a 1% impact versus a 2%, 3%, and the scenarios just go on and on. But what I wanted to do was show, and again, the instructions were not using ESSER dollars, using GOB dollars. What was the impact? And so, as you can see, we go from 20%. If we offer some kind of a 1% adjustment, it takes our fund balance down to 19.62, okay? If you do something for 2% next year, it looks like about 18.98, 3%, 18.35, 4%, 17, 5%, looking at about 17.11%. So I wanted to share this information because I wanted to make sure that, because there had been discussions about what is the impact of a raise on the general operating budget. I wanted to be sure that the SAB was aware of what these projected dollars would do to our fund balance. So are there any questions here about these scenarios?
Is there any way you can move it to the left?
Right.
We can't see the 5%.
Okay.
Okay, all right,
And I was going to ask if you would repeat the amounts because my screen has them kind of small.
okay, let me see if I can do something here and go over here. Did that do any better for us?
It's coming just a little bit.
Mhm.
Okay, let's do this. How about this?
That's better.
It's better. That's better.
Okay, all right. So, so again, the 1% here that you see, if you look down at the very bottom, it takes the fund balance down to the 19.62%, and a 1% roughly cost us about $307,000. 2%, okay, 3%, 4%, 5%, $1.5 million. It takes our fund balance down to about that 17.11%, okay? And these are just projections based on our anticipated budget for the 2021-2022 school year. So are there any questions here about these scenarios?
Ms. Morrill,
I have no questions.
Ms. Oswald,
No questions.
I have no questions.
Thank you, Dr. Beckwith. That does conclude my presentation on the 2021-2022 budget. We'll obviously look for some kind of final adoption at a future board meeting.
We have no further business. May I have a motion for adjournment?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and second. We're ready for the question. Are there any? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
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 Aye. There are no no's. The meeting is adjourned. Have a pleasant evening.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.